So, yeah, I guess broad question, like what has been your experience while at the agency, talking to other case officers, working with the Israelis? What stands out?
My experience is universally negative. Universally negative. I've never had a positive encounter with Mossad. I have never met a CIA officer who has had a positive encounter with Mossad. Because the Mossad doesn't give two shits what you think or what you are trying to focus on in your job. They care only about Israel.
Born in 1949, in the shadow of Israel's bloody war for independence, the Mossad was built to ensure the young nation's survival at any cost. From hunting Nazis like Adolf Eichmann to Operation Wrath of God, a relentless campaign of revenge, to the daring raid at Entebbe, the Mossad forged a reputation as the world's most feared intelligence agency. But survival has a price, because behind the heroics is another story, one of espionage against its closest ally, stolen secrets, bloody cover-ups, and even questions about America's darkest day. So how far will the Mossad go to protect Israel, even if it meant betraying America? What secrets has our ally taken from us, and why does Washington look the other way? And when whispers tie the Mossad to 9/11, do we dare ask if they're true? This is the story of the Mossad, friend or foe.
Hello, I'm Mike Droberg, a Marine Corps veteran and filmmaker, and we will try to answer these questions on today's episode of Forgotten History.
In 1948, the State of Israel was born in fire. Within hours of declaring independence, the armies of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq descended on the tiny new nation. For Israel's 600,000 Jews, survival was far from guaranteed. 6,000 lives were lost, 1% of the population, but against all odds, Israel endured. And in that crucible of war came a lesson carved into the national psyche. Israel could not survive without intelligence. Even before independence, Jewish underground groups had built secret networks. The Haganah, Irgun, and the Stern Gang all ran their own spies and saboteurs. The Haganah's intelligence arm, known as the Sheh, became the model for something larger. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, believed that a nation born in blood needs more than tanks and planes. It needs eyes, ears, and knives in the dark. So in December of 1949, Ben-Gurion created a new organization, the Institute for Coordination, the Mossad. Its first director was Reuven Shiloah, a quiet diplomat with a clear mission to gather intelligence abroad, run covert operations, and to protect Jews everywhere in the world. From its earliest days, the Mossad lived with two faces. To Israelis, it was a shield against annihilation. To others, it was a dagger, an espionage service without borders. And that dual identity would make Israel legendary and leave America wondering whether it was an ally or a target. In its early years, the Mossad won admiration even from its enemies. Its most famous triumph came in 1960 when it tracked down Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust, hiding in Buenos Aires under a false name. They snatched him off the street, smuggled him to Israel, and put him on trial. Survivors of the camps watched as justice was served. Eichmann was convicted of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes against the Jewish people. And in June of 1962, he was hanged, the only civilian execution ever carried out in Israel's history. His ashes were scattered at sea, so no trace of him would remain. With that, the Mossad's legend was born. For the rest of the 1960s, Israel was not just fighting wars, it was quietly building the ultimate weapon, the atom bomb. Its nuclear reactor at Dimona was under construction, and the United States was officially opposed to Israel developing nuclear arms. But that didn't stop the Mossad. Suspicion soon fell on a company in Apollo, Pennsylvania, the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation, or NUMEC. Over the course of a decade, hundreds of pounds of highly enriched uranium went missing. U.S. intelligence officials believed that it had been smuggled to Israel to fuel its secret weapons program. To this day, the case has never been solved, but the rumors remain. America's nuclear stockpile was raided not by Moscow, but by its closest ally. Then came 1967. In the middle of the Six-Day War, the USS Liberty, a U.S. Navy intelligence ship, was stationed in international waters off the coast of Sinai. Survivors recall Israeli jets flying over the ship the day before, close enough that the pilots waved from the cockpits. A massive American flag was flying from her mast. To the men aboard, there was no question their identity was clear. But the next day, that same ship came under fire. Israeli jets strafed the deck with rockets and napalm. Torpedo boats closed in, blasting holes in the hull. By the time it was over, 34 Americans were dead and 171 were wounded. Israel claimed it was a case of mistaken identity, that the Liberty had been confused for an Egyptian vessel. Survivors say that story is impossible. The ships looked nothing alike, and the Liberty's flag was flying large enough to be seen from miles away. So why the attack? Some believe the Liberty was intercepting Israeli transmissions about its secret nuclear program. Others say it was silenced to cover up the killing of Egyptian prisoners of war. And still others argue it was a false flag, an attempt to sink the ship and frame Egypt, dragging the U.S. directly into the Six-Day War. We may never know the answer, but what we do know is this: American blood was spilled, and Washington buried the truth to preserve the alliance. Washington accepted Israel's apology, pocketed compensation payments, and moved on. Then, in 1972, the world was shocked by the Munich Olympics massacre, where Palestinian gunmen murdered 11 Israeli athletes. Israel's answer was Operation Wrath of God, a relentless campaign of targeted assassinations against the men believed responsible. In cafes, on quiet streets, even in bedrooms, the Mossad hunted them one by one. In Rome, agents shot Wael Zawader, a Palestine Liberation Organization representative, as he returned to his apartment. In Paris, Mahmoud Hamshari picked up his phone and triggered the bomb the Mossad had planted beneath it. And in Beirut, Ali Hassan Salameh, known as the Red Prince, and the senior Black September commander, was killed by a massive car bomb in 1979. And when Mossad operatives in Norway killed the wrong man, an innocent waiter, in what became known as the Lillehammer Affair, the world saw that justice carried a price. To its supporters, it was the cost of striking back. To critics, it was murder without borders. Then in 1976, an Air France jet was hijacked by Palestinian and German terrorists and flown to Entebbe, Uganda. More than 100 hostages, most of them Israeli, were held inside a terminal, guarded by armed captors and protected by Ugandan dictator Idi Amin. While the world hesitated, Israel acted. And the Mossad was crucial in providing actionable intelligence. In the night of July 4th, a team of commandos flew 2,500 miles, stormed the airport terminal, and in a blistering firefight, killed all the hijackers and rescued 102 hostages. Only 3 hostages died, along with 1 commando, Lieutenant Colonel Yonatan Netanyahu, the brother of Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. The raid shocked the world. It was bold, audacious, and surgical. A rescue mission studied in military academies to this very day. By the 1980s, Israel had survived multiple wars. It had nuclear weapons in the shadows, advanced jet fighters, and a reputation for daring covert strikes. But its appetite for secrets hadn't slowed. In 1985, America learned that its friendliest of allies could also be its most relentless spy. Jonathan Pollard was a U.S. Navy intelligence analyst. His job gave him access to America's most guarded information, classified reports on Soviet weaponry, Arab military forces, and U.S. collection methods. Pollard sold that information to Israel. Not a handful of documents, suitcases full. The CIA later called it one of the most damaging breaches in U.S. history. Caught in the act, Pollard pled guilty in 1987 and was sentenced to life in prison. Israel at first denied involvement, but eventually admitted it, that he had been working for them and even granted him citizenship while he was behind bars. For decades, Israeli politicians pressed Washington for his release. And after serving 30 years, Pollard was paroled in 2015 under strict conditions. 5 years later, once his parole ended, he moved to Israel legally, where he was welcomed, not as a criminal, but as a national hero. But Pollard was only the beginning. Through the 1980s and 90s, U.S. counterintelligence repeatedly caught Israel stealing American technology, missile telemetry, F-16 blueprints, reconnaissance satellite designs, even the secrets of advanced tank cannons. A 1998 report by security scholar Duncan Clark concluded that Israel was one of the most aggressive, friendly spies the United States had ever faced. And the espionage also touched America's wallets. In 1992, U.S. companies accused Israel of stealing technology to build its own fighter jets and missile defense systems, undercutting American firms in the global arms market. Billions of dollars were at stake. Once again, Washington looked the other way. Then the dawn of the new millennium would bring new enemies and new wars. For the United States, it was Al-Qaeda, a shadow network that had struck at the very heart of New York and Washington. For Israel, it was the Second Intifada, an armed Palestinian uprising marked by suicide bombings, street battles, and waves of bloodshed in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. Both nations framed their struggles as a war for survival. But in the fog of war, on the war on terror, the lines between friend and foe blurred once again, and the Mossad was never far from the shadows. September 11th, 2001, the darkest day in American memory. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost. As the towers burned, witnesses in New Jersey spotted something strange. 5 men, filming the carnage and appearing to celebrate. Police pull over their white van, registered to a moving company. Inside were professional cameras, box cutters, thousands in cash, and multiple passports. The men, they were Israelis. The FBI held them for 71 days before quietly deporting them. No press conferences, no public explanation, just silence. Years later, on Israeli television, one of them, Oded Elner, admitted, "Our purpose was to document the event." But how did they know the towers would be attacked, with cameras ready, rolling before the world even understood what was happening? Who sent them? What exactly did they know, and why did Washington bury the story? In the years that followed, America launched 2 wars. In Iraq, Israeli intelligence was among the loudest voices claiming Saddam Hussein still had weapons of mass destruction. Those stockpiles never materialized. In Afghanistan, Israel shared counterterrorism tips, sometimes useful, sometimes self-serving. The Mossad had always put Israel's survival first, even if it meant nudging America into wars that benefited Israel more than the United States. And even when Washington was negotiating for peace, the Mossad was watching. In 2015, reports surfaced that Israel spied on U.S. talks with Iran over its nuclear program. Intelligence from those negotiations was allegedly passed to sympathetic lawmakers on Capitol Hill to sabotage the deal. Israel denied it, but once again, the whispers were the same. America's closest ally was also its most relentless spy. But espionage doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it comes from suits and lobbyists walking the halls of Washington. No group embodies that more than AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Officially, it calls itself a domestic lobbying organization. But unlike other foreign lobbies, which must register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, AIPAC is exempt. That special privilege means it avoids the scrutiny applied to Saudi, Chinese, or Russian influence campaigns, even in the light of scandals that would have destroyed any other group. In 2004, the FBI caught Pentagon analyst Larry Franklin passing top-secret information about Iran to 2 AIPAC officials. Franklin pled guilty. The officials were indicted for conspiring to receive national defense information, but after years of legal wrangling, the charges were dropped. AIPAC walked free, and the line between lobbying and espionage blurred into nothing. But betrayal wouldn't stop in the boardroom or the back room. In the digital age, it would come straight into our phones. The 21st century changed the battlefield. Wars were no longer fought just with tanks and jets, but with malware, spyware, and information itself. And once again, the Mossad was in the thick of it. In 2010, the world discovered a computer virus like no other, Stuxnet. It crippled Iran's nuclear centrifuges with surgical precision. Many believed it was a joint U.S.-Israeli operation, with the Mossad providing the target lists. It was proof that Israel's spies had evolved from assassins and saboteurs into cyber warriors. But cyber weapons are a double-edged sword. In 2021, the U.S. Commerce Department blacklisted Israeli companies NSO Group and Kinduru for selling spyware used against American diplomats, journalists, and even officials. Their most infamous creation, Pegasus, could turn any smartphone into a pocket spy, listening through the microphone and pulling every message and file without the user ever knowing. Sold under the banner of counterterrorism, Pegasus was found in the hands of authoritarian regimes and turned against America's own. It was aimed at journalists, dissidents, even billionaires. Investigators found that associates of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi were hacked with Pegasus in the months before his brutal murder inside the Saudi consulate. His friends' phones became open windows, feeding everything they said and wrote to hostile governments. To many, it looked like spyware had become a death warrant. Even Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, wasn't safe. After a message from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman landed on his WhatsApp, forensic analysts believe Pegasus was used to break into Bezos' phone. His private data was stolen. So if the owner of Amazon can be hacked with a text, what chance does anyone else have? Once again, Washington drew a line with China, Russia, and Iran. But when the spyware came from Israel, the response was quieter, softer, cautious. To some, it looked like the same double standard that had followed the Mossad for decades. Critics will say, but America does the same thing. And they're right. The CIA toppled governments in Iran, Guatemala, and Chile. It ran illegal experiments under MKUltra. It spied on Americans during Vietnam and Watergate. Intelligence agencies lie, cheat, and steal. That's their nature. But here's the difference. When the CIA gets caught, Americans call it a scandal. When the Mossad gets caught, Washington shrugs. Jonathan Pollard steals thousands of classified documents, and decades later, Israel celebrates him as a hero. Israel attacks an American ship, kills 34 sailors, and the U.S. calls it a mistake. Israeli spyware hacks American diplomats, and instead of sanctions, there are excuses. Why the double standard? Why is one ally above accountability? Let me be clear. America and Israel share deep Judeo-Christian ties, and I support the state of Israel and its right to exist. But supporting Israel doesn't mean turning a blind eye when its intelligence service betrays America's trust. No ally should be above accountability. What do you think? Let us know in the comments below.
Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments or show ideas, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks again.